Early January 8, a coordinated Ukrainian drone operation struck Engels Air Base, disrupting Russia's strategic bomber operations deep inside its territory.
January 8, 3:18 a.m., Engels Air Base, central Russia. The runway lights glow against frozen concrete as three Tu-160 strategic bombers sit motionless on the tarmac. Their engines are silent. Their fuel tanks are empty. Ground crews move slowly around them, connecting hoses, running de-icing equipment, treating this moment as routine. For months, this base has been considered untouchable. To Russian commanders, this is the safest phase of a bomber's cycle. Missions are complete. Crews are exhausted. Aircraft are back on home ground, clustered close to refueling nodes to conserve time and manpower. The air defenses stand watch, but nothing about the scene suggests urgency. It looks like another quiet winter night inside Russia's strategic aviation sanctuary. What they do not know is that this exact window has been studied, measured, and rehearsed. Ukrainian intelligence has been waiting for the bombers to land, for fuel lines to be exposed, and for defenses to relax. This moment, when the aircraft cannot move and the base is at its most vulnerable, is the moment they plan to exploit. At 3:18 a.m., something breaks the stillness. A low, rising scream cuts through the cold air. A Ukrainian strike drone appears at treetop height, moving fast and low, invisible to long-range radar until it is already too close. Seconds later, it slams directly into the fuselage of a Tu-160 parked beside the central refueling manifold. The explosion tears through metal and fuel lines in a single violent flash, rupturing the aircraft and igniting spilled aviation fuel across the concrete. That impact is not the strike, it is the signal. Within moments, 7 additional drones surge in from multiple vectors, diving toward fuel infrastructure, storage tanks, and parked bombers. The most expensive aircraft in Russia's strategic arsenal sit helplessly in place as fire races across the apron. By 3:22 a.m., the runway has become an inferno. Flames climb into the night sky, fed by thousands of liters of specialized aviation fuel, while shockwaves ripple through the base. This is not a random attack, it is a calculation. Engels Air Base was designed to protect the core of Russia's nuclear bomber force. It sits hundreds of kilometers from the Ukrainian border, guarded by layered air defenses and years of institutional confidence. On this runway rest aircraft that cannot be replaced quickly, aircraft meant to launch long-range cruise missiles from deep inside safe airspace. Losing them on the ground was supposed to be impossible. Yet in the span of 4 minutes, that assumption collapses. As fires spread and secondary detonations begin to echo across the base, the scale of what is unfolding becomes clear. This is not just damage to aircraft. It is a direct strike on Russia's strategic aviation capability, carried out at the moment it felt most secure. And the night is not over. If you were planning this attack, would you have gone after the bombers first or the fuel that keeps them alive? To understand how this strike was possible, you have to understand what Engels Air Base represents inside Russia's military system. This is not a forward operating strip or a temporary deployment site. Engels is the home of Russia's heavy bomber aviation regiment, the core of its long-range strike force. It is where Tu-160 and Tu-95 aircraft are serviced, fueled, and prepared for missions that can reach across Europe without ever leaving Russian airspace. These aircraft are rare. Russia operates fewer than 20 Tu-160 bombers, each one a specialized platform built during the Soviet era and maintained through a shrinking industrial base. Unlike tanks or artillery, they cannot be replaced quickly. Manufacturing a single new airframe takes years, not months, and requires components and expertise that no longer exist at scale. Every bomber on that runway represents both strategic power and institutional fragility. What makes them even more vulnerable is fuel. The Tu-160 does not use standard aviation fuel. It relies on a specialized temperature-controlled mixture designed for high-speed, long-range flight. In winter conditions, that fuel must be stored, heated, and pressurized near the taxiways. This creates fixed refueling nodes, predictable locations where aircraft and infrastructure converge. Ukrainian intelligence noticed something unusual in early January. Satellite imagery and thermal signatures showed multiple bombers being clustered unusually close together near the central refueling manifold. Freezing temperatures had forced Russian ground crews to de-ice and refuel several aircraft simultaneously, violating spacing protocols designed to prevent chain damage. It was a convenience decision, based on confidence that no enemy could reach this far with precision. That confidence shaped everything that followed. Engels is protected by layered air defenses, including long-range systems designed to intercept high-altitude threats and point defense units meant to stop cruise missiles and aircraft. On paper, the base sits inside one of the densest defensive bubbles in the world. But those systems were optimized for the wrong kind of threat. They are built to see big targets, coming fast and high, from predictable directions. Ukraine did not intend to play that game. 2 hours before the strike, Ukrainian forces launched a wave of modified commercial drones from border regions hundreds of kilometers away. These drones were not armed. They carried simple metal reflectors designed to inflate their radar signatures, making them appear far larger than they were. Flying at higher altitudes, they lit up Russian radar screens across multiple regions. The response was immediate. Air defense crews activated systems, tracked contacts, and fired interceptor missiles. Millions of dollars in defensive ammunition were spent destroying drones that cost a fraction of that price. But the real effect was invisible. Each radar activation revealed precise locations, frequencies, and engagement patterns. Ukrainian electronic warfare teams monitored every response, mapping the defensive network in real time. There was also a human factor. After hours of chasing false targets, alert fatigue set in. Operators became slower, more skeptical, less responsive. When alarms repeat without consequence, reaction times slip. The sky begins to feel empty again. That was the opening. While attention remained focused upward, the actual strike package crossed the border at low altitude. 8 Polyanitsia rocket drone hybrids, powered by small jet engines, dropped to just meters above the terrain. At that height, long-range radar loses them entirely. Trees, buildings, and terrain clutter hide their signatures as they weave through valleys and follow rivers. These drones did not rely on live communication. Their routes were programmed in advance using months of satellite imagery, terrain analysis, and signal intelligence. They flew in complete radio silence, using inertial and terrain reference navigation. There was nothing to jam, nothing to intercept, and nothing to trace in real time. By the time Russian defenses realized something was wrong, the strike assets were already inside the perimeter, and the most vulnerable target on the base was waiting, fully exposed. By the time the first Russian air defense crews realized the threat was not another false alarm, the drones were already inside the engagement zone. The warning did not come from long-range radar. It came from proximity sensors and sudden heat signatures erupting near the tarmac. The moment of realization arrived too late to matter. At 3:18 a.m., the lead drone reached its target. This first unit was not aimed at an aircraft. It was aimed at the fuel manifold, the central junction where refueling lines fed every bomber parked nearby. The drone descended sharply and detonated on impact, releasing a thermobaric warhead designed for overpressure rather than fragmentation. The explosion aerosolized fuel in the surrounding pipes before igniting it, creating a violent vacuum blast that ruptured valves and tore open the manifold in a fraction of a second. Fuel surged across the concrete apron, spreading faster than crews could react. Fire raced outward in a widening pool, licking at landing gear, engine nacelles, and exposed wiring. This was the trigger point Ukrainian planners had designed the entire operation around. Only after that detonation did Russian point defense systems begin to respond. Pantsir S-1 units on the perimeter acquired low-altitude contacts and opened fire. Tracers cut through smoke and flame as interceptors streaked toward incoming drones. One of the second-wave drones was destroyed at altitude, exploding into fragments that scattered across the taxiway. For a brief moment, it looked as if the defenses might stabilize the situation. They did not. The third drone adjusted its course mid-flight, using debris and smoke as cover, and slammed directly into a pressurized fuel storage tank. The tank contained tens of thousands of liters of aviation fuel, heated and compressed to keep it operational in sub-zero conditions. When the warhead penetrated the casing, the fuel did not burn gradually, it vaporized. The resulting fireball expanded outward at hundreds of meters per second. A thermal pulse surged across the apron, engulfing nearby aircraft in seconds. The Park Tu-160 seconds, already soaked in fuel from the ruptured manifold, absorbed the blast directly into their wings and fuselages. By 3:22 a.m., the runway was fully compromised. The remaining 5 drones executed their terminal dives almost simultaneously, their timing coordinated down to fractions of a second. 2 struck maintenance hangars where specialized avionics and engine components were stored. These were not generic warehouses. They housed parts that could not be replaced quickly, if at all. Another drone hit the air traffic control tower, severing the base's ability to coordinate any meaningful response. The final drone targeted a secondary fuel depot on the western edge of the base. Its detonation ensured that the fires would not be contained, forcing them to spread uncontrollably across connected infrastructure. As flames intensified, the physics turned brutal. Aluminum alloys used in bomber wings lose structural integrity at temperatures far below those reached in the fuel fires now burning across Engels. Within minutes, wings began to deform. Control surfaces collapsed. Hydraulic systems failed as seals cooked inside their housings. The bombers did not simply burn. They softened, sagged, and then gave way. Inside the aircraft, sophisticated avionics, radar systems, and flight controls were effectively baked in place. Even before secondary explosions, these airframes were already beyond recovery. Then came the missiles. Several Tu-95 bombers parked nearby were loaded with cruise missiles for a scheduled operation later that morning. When flames reached their weapons bays, the warheads detonated. One explosion triggered another, setting off a chain reaction that ripped through the parking area. Shock waves rolled across the base, shattering windows kilometers away. Seismic sensors in the region registered the blast as a small earthquake. Residents reported a deep, sustained rumble, followed by a rising column of fire visible far beyond the perimeter fence. Fire crews arrived within minutes, but they could not approach. The fuel burned too hot, too wide, and too fast. Water was useless. Foam supplies were overwhelmed almost immediately. For hours, the blaze consumed what remained, unchecked. By sunrise, Engels Air Base no longer resembled a strategic aviation hub. It looked like a wreckage field. Charred fuselages lay twisted beside puddles of molten metal. The most valuable bombers in Russia's inventory had been destroyed without ever leaving the ground. And the implications of that loss were only beginning to unfold. If you are still watching at this point, you made it through the firestorm. Drop a quick comment and let us know what country you are watching from. By the time the fires at Engels began to subside, the damage had already moved beyond the runway. What burned that night was not just aircraft and fuel. It was an entire operational assumption that Russia's strategic aviation could be protected by distance alone. The immediate problem for Russian command was simple and brutal. Engels Air Base was not just a parking area. It was the only facility equipped with the heavy maintenance base, specialized tooling, and trained personnel required to service the Tu-160 fleet. With those hangars damaged and the refueling infrastructure destroyed, the base could no longer function as a hub for strategic bomber operations. That reality forced a decision. Surviving aircraft had to be relocated, and there were very few places they could go. The solution was Olenia Air Base, far to the north, deep inside the Arctic region. On paper, it offered distance and security. In practice, it introduced a cascade of new problems that Russian planners could not avoid. Olenia sits more than 1,200 kilometers farther from operational launch zones. Every sortie from that location adds thousands of kilometers to a round-trip mission. For aircraft like the Tu-160, this matters enormously. These bombers operate within strict engine life limits, measured in flight hours rather than calendar years. Arctic operations are especially punishing. Cold starts, extended flight times, and harsher conditions accelerate wear at nearly twice the normal rate. Maintenance, already strained, becomes a bottleneck. Payload is the next casualty. To fly the additional distance, bombers must carry more fuel internally. That fuel displaces weapons. A Tu-160 designed to carry 12 long-range cruise missiles can now carry only 7 or 8. Strike capacity drops immediately, not because of enemy action in the air, but because of physics on the ground. Operational tempo collapses with it. Missions take longer to prepare, longer to fly, and longer to recover from. What had been a system designed for sustained missile campaigns becomes slow, fragile, and difficult to scale. Russia's ability to launch large, coordinated waves of cruise missiles from strategic aviation is sharply reduced. But the damage does not stop at logistics. Strategic bombers are a pillar of nuclear deterrence, not because they are always used, but because they are supposed to be survivable. The credibility of that deterrent depends on the belief that these assets cannot be neutralized easily. What happened at Engels shattered that belief. If a low-cost drone can reach a Tu-160 on the tarmac, then so can a cruise missile. So can a precision-guided munition launched from far beyond the horizon. The psychological shield surrounding these aircraft is gone, and once lost, it cannot be restored by statements or reassurances. There were also losses that cannot be counted in burned metal. Reports indicate that several senior flight engineers and experienced pilots were present near the flight line during the strike, conducting briefings and post-mission checks. These are specialists with decades of accumulated knowledge. You can rebuild a hangar in months. You cannot replace a strategic bomber commander in less than a decade. That institutional memory was destroyed alongside the aircraft. From a cost perspective, the imbalance is staggering. The Ukrainian attack relied on 8 strike drones, several dozen decoys, and months of planning and intelligence work. The estimated cost runs into a few $1 million. The damage inflicted includes multiple strategic bombers, cruise missiles, specialized infrastructure, and long-term operational degradation valued in the hundreds of millions, if not more. The exchange ratio favors the attacker by orders of magnitude. This is not just a tactical victory, it is a demonstration. Modern warfare no longer rewards size and expense alone. It rewards patience, precision, and the ability to identify moments when even the most powerful systems are briefly exposed. Engels was not defeated by overwhelming force. It was defeated by timing. As Russian leadership faces the consequences of this strike, one question dominates internal discussions. How do you retaliate against an enemy who has shown they can reach what you believed was unreachable? And more importantly, how do you prevent it from happening again? If you're finding this breakdown useful, now's a good time to like the video and subscribe. Not because it helps the channel, but because this is exactly how modern warfare is changing, and it's not slowing down. By daylight on January 8th, the fires at Engels had finally burned themselves out. Satellite imagery showed the damage with clinical clarity. Charred bomber frames, collapsed hangar roofs, long black scars where fuel had poured and ignited. What had once been the centerpiece of Russia's strategic aviation now looked like a cautionary diagram. The immediate losses were visible. Multiple Tu-160 and Tu-95 bombers rendered permanently unusable. Cruise missiles destroyed before they could ever be launched. Fuel systems and maintenance facilities damaged beyond rapid repair. But the deeper cost lay beneath the surface, in capability that could not be rebuilt on any meaningful timeline. Strategic aviation is not just metal and engines. It is doctrine, experience, and credibility. Those bombers existed to signal reach and survivability. They were meant to assure allies and deter adversaries by their very presence. Watching them burn on the ground stripped that signal of much of its force. In Moscow, official responses were restrained and carefully worded. There was no detailed public accounting of losses, no immediate admission of vulnerability. But inside planning rooms, the implications were unavoidable. Relocation to Arctic bases buys distance, not safety. Longer routes reduce payloads. Slower cycles reduce pressure. What had been a blunt instrument of power now carries constraints at every step. From a strategic perspective, this strike illustrates a hard truth about modern conflict. Expensive systems concentrate risk. When they depend on fixed infrastructure and predictable routines, they create moments of exposure that a patient adversary can exploit. Ukraine did not need to match Russia plane for plane or missile for missile. It needed to understand when and where those planes were weakest. The arithmetic is unforgiving. A handful of low-cost systems, combined with intelligence and timing, erased assets worth hundreds of millions and imposed long-term operational penalties that cannot be measured in dollars alone. This is the asymmetry shaping today's wars. Engels was not just an attack, it was a message. It said that distance is no longer a shield, that sanctuaries can be penetrated, and that control of the battle space increasingly belongs to those who can see patterns, wait patiently, and strike when defenses look away. For Russia's strategic aviation, the winter of this war changed its character. The bombers that remain may still fly, but they do so under a new reality, one where safety is conditional and certainty is gone. How this reshapes future operations, deterrence, and escalation is still unfolding. But one thing is already clear. The rules that governed air power for decades no longer apply in the way they once did. If you have thoughts on what this strike means for the future of strategic bombers and long-range deterrence, share them in the comments. These conversations matter because understanding how warfare is changing is the first step to understanding what comes next.